today we have another session on kindness is legal, and today we would like to talk about the ABC program, the guidelines, etc. Again with Mr. Inda Sandhu. He's the District Animal Welfare Officer of Animal Welfare Board of India, and I will now invite him and we can get started. Okay, see you in a bit with Inder. Hi, somebody has joined, so we're waiting for Inder to join. Hope you're all doing well on a Friday night. So we're just waiting for, hi everyone, just for Inder to hopefully get the invite and join us. Yes, he has joined. So let's see. Give us 1 minute, please. So as I said before, we would like to talk about the ABC today. On the agenda, we also had the feeder issues, and we want to talk about feeding in general, but I think there won't be enough time, so we will schedule that another time. But the main conversation now is the animal birth control, the guidelines, etc. So the first thing we want to talk about is whether the ABC will help in reducing the human-animal conflict, and that will be a nice discussion we have today. I hear something. Yay!
Okay.
Finally! We'll keep practicing. Next time it will be perfect.
Perfect. All right.
Okay, so I already said hi to everyone. Hi to you. Hope you're fine on a Friday evening.
I'm doing
Good.
great. Hope
So
everybody's
let's
doing
start. Yes, let's start with the ABC. We wanted to talk in detail about the ABC program. I think we don't have enough time to talk about the feeding program and in general problems people face with regards to feeding. So we start with the ABC program.
Sure.
So, do you think animal birth control will help reducing the human-animal conflict in general?
Absolutely. One of the major reasons why we have human-animal conflict is dogs being aggressive. The two major reasons for dogs being aggressive are when there's females protecting their puppies. And for the male, it's when there's a female on heat and they're chasing that female, they're competing with each other, they're fighting, they get into argument, they get into fights, and if a human comes in between, there's a chance to get bit. So those are the two most common reasons. And of course, ABC is going to take care of both of them. The female is not going to have puppies anymore, and she's not going to come on heat. The males are not going to be competing for the females. They won't have any testosterone in their body. So that kind of takes care of both those situations.
Will it also solve the territorial behavior a bit, do you think? Because
yes, it does. So one of the things that
pack animals, so maybe the pack leader will calm down a bit.
Yes, the pack mentality does calm down when that happens. There's several advantages to sterilization, and we can talk about that. If what are the benefits of sterilization to the animal itself. But that pack mentality does die down. The aggression goes down. Now, of course, it doesn't happen as soon as the sterilizations happen. It takes about 2 or 3 months, or sometimes even 4 months, for the testosterone to drain out of their body. That is also why it is best to get the sterilization done before they hit sexual maturity, because they don't have the testosterone in their body to begin with. So we've seen this when we do this in puppies. They stay docile. They don't get into that aggressive phase because they've never known testosterone.
So what would be the earliest we can sterilize a dog?
That's a tricky question in itself. Internationally, what the rule is that we can sterilize puppies when they are 4 pounds, which is 2 kilos. That happens at about 2 months. Now, our doctors, our vets in India are not very specialized. We don't follow a lot of the procedures that should be followed, including blood tests. We don't have gas anesthesia. So what we recommend, what we've seen over the years is right around 3.5, 4 months is when we can get the sterilizations done. Now, ABC guidelines, AWBI guidelines for ABC claim that they should have achieved sexual maturity. There's a reason why that was done, and it was done for a monetary reason because there was no way for them to count their organs because their organs are so tiny if they're removed early. They virtually, they shrink, any organ shrinks in size once we remove them. And the testicles are so tiny and the ovaries are so disjoint that they weren't able to preserve them in formaldehyde, and contractors were not getting paid. This was happening in the early 90s. And they complained to AWBI saying that there's no way we can be paid for puppies. So AWBI changed that guideline to include sexual maturity when their organs develop, which I think was very unfortunate, but that's what the guidelines say. So what we normally do is we'll wait for the puppies till their organs are developed. If you want to get them done, still there are several advantages of getting dogs sterilized before they achieve sexual maturity. For females, there is a much lesser risk of mammary cancer that has been proven by one study after another. There's at least a 35% reduction in mammary cancer, mammary tumors, if they get sterilized before they hit sexual maturity. Ovarian cancer, again, about a 30% reduction in ovarian cancer if it's early sterilization. The only problem they've seen in studies is some females get incontinent when they're about 10 or 12 years old. In our stray dogs case, most stray dogs don't live to be 10 or 12. And even if they're incontinent on the street, it doesn't really matter. They can be incontinent. They could be peeing a little on the street. That is rare. That happens in about 15% of the cases in the studies that was done. But those are the rules. We have to play by the rules of the AWBI. We get them sterilized when they are when they reach a particular age, yes.
Is it safe to sterilize a female when she is in heat? Because a lot of catches come when the female is in heat.
No.
And they take her in for
No, it's not. So what happens is when a female is in heat, just like with the humans, our bodies, our organs are enlarged. Your internal organs are enlarged. Your ovaries are enlarged. And when the heat stops, if we do surgery then, and when the organs come back to the regular the size, so the ligation, which is the sutures which are done on the inside, they get loose and they can be internal bleeding. So what we normally do is we wait about a week after their heat has ended so that the organs have come back to their original size. Then we do it. Now, sometimes when they've mated, there is a possibility that they do get pregnant, but within the first 7 days or 10 days, the embryo has not formed yet. So it is not really an abortion. Even if you get the sterilization done, it doesn't count as an abortion because the embryo is not formed. Embryos start forming at about 15 to 20 days. So you have about a 10-day buffer after the heat is finished. That's when you should get it done. But you've got to be very, very careful and mark it on your calendar and make sure the female gets picked up.
Yeah, so I mean, there are a lot of people out there who object, of course, sterilization on where we think on a larger scale, say, okay, we interfere with nature. So there's a huge topic where even animal lovers say, how can you take away their urge? How can you take away their fun, maybe? Yeah. What is your opinion on that?
So first of all, I have to say a couple of things. More benefits of sterilization first. There are several benefits to it. One, we already spoke about the aggression. One is prostate cancer. So 15% of all adult dogs will die of prostate cancer. You take their prostate away, they won't get prostate cancer. you are prolonging the life of your pet and your stray dog by sterilizing them. 15% of females die of ovarian cancer. You take their ovaries away, they won't get ovarian cancer. That helps them. We've already spoken, 5% of females in their lifetime, stray dogs in India, get mammary tumors. That doesn't happen once they're sterilized. The dogs do get a little lethargic after, the males get a little lethargic after their testicles have been removed. So we need to start feeding them a little lesser food. So sometimes we feel guilty that the testicles have been taken, so we'll start feeding them more. When their testosterone is low and the metabolism slows down, we actually have to feed them less. Dogs will not mark their territory, so they won't lift their leg and pee, which is what animal haters don't like when they see pee on their cars and on the doors and all that. So animals will pee for two reasons. One is they mark their territory for females when they're trying to attract females. All animals do that, not just dogs. Once and the second is to find their way back. So they can smell their own urine. That's how you've seen some dogs who come back after several months. They're basically going around trying to smell their own urine. That's the only GPS they have in their head. So they will still urinate. They'll still be able to smell their own urine, of course, but they won't have the urge of marking a territory to attract females. So that, again, is beneficial for them. But to answer your question, is it right for us to interfere with nature? The answer is no. We should not interfere with nature. But the problem here is we're picking the lesser of two evils. We've already interfered with nature when we decided to domesticate the wolves. That happened centuries and centuries ago. Any animal that we've domesticated, we've already interfered with nature, be it a cow, sheep, emus lately, pigs, camels, horses. We've taken them away from the jungle. In effect, what we've done is we've taken away their predators. Now they have no predators. And since they have no predators, there is no balance of their population. We keep on feeding them, they keep on multiplying, but they're not dying at the same rate because there are no predators. Therefore, there's an overpopulation. So we have to control their population with artificial means. Luckily for us, dogs are easy to sterilize. And that's why this program has worked. Otherwise, it would have been a crazy situation. Cows, for instance, impossible to sterilize a cow, or not impossible, but very difficult to sterilize a cow. And that's why they multiply at the rates they are. The male bull is easier. Again, is not done for several reasons, but sterilization is the lesser of the two evils. Not something we'd want to do, but we have created this problem for dogs. It's not their fault. Now we're choosing the lesser of the two evils.
Yeah, I guess so. Coming to that topic, the ABC program in general, I've been in this since 13 years, and what I have seen, I have done my investigations on ABC program. I've been to centers and did my investigation. And as I said, I've seen it 13 years. To me, personally, it is not effective. Whatever I have seen in 13 years, there was a stretch where it was maybe a little better, but these days, I don't feel it's effective due to certain reasons. What is your opinion on that? I mean, is it effective? Do we really do a good job, or is it waste of time?
Well, it's not a waste of time, but we do a really, really poor job. In India, there are several reasons why we do a poor job. It's the structure that we have, which kind of lends itself to doing a poor job. And I'll explain it a little bit. We have a weird dichotomy in India. Is the government worse, or is the contracts that government issues, are they worse? So the government, of course, doesn't want to do their job. The incompetence levels are really high. The level of responsibility towards a project are really low. The same is true when they're building roads or dams or anything. The level of responsibility is low. And the way the government feels, and the reason why I'm saying this is there's just two ways to run ABC. One is that the government does it themselves. When the government does it themselves, they'll have the animal husbandry department, their own vets, their own dog catchers running the actual show. So there is no issues of money being mismanaged. They can do a better job in terms of they don't have any pressure on the contractor. They can do proper pickup and proper post-operative care because no personal stake involved in it. But that's also the reason why they do a bad job, because there is no level of responsibility. The second way of doing it is the way that almost all municipal corporations in India do it. I haven't seen any municipal corporation do it themselves. They usually contract it out because they don't have the expertise. So just like with everything else, with your sweepers and cleaning staff and all that, all of it is contracted out. And when they contract it out, it's the way these contracts are written, which is the bane of the ABC program in India. So what happens is the contractor wins the contract on a tender basis, and tenders are usually won on the lowest bidder formula. So what happens is these contractors, when the tender goes out, they will undercut their prices because they want to win the contract.
So can anyone bid on it, or can any individual do it, or is it just like, can I just say, okay, I want to start an ABC program? Can I do it?
Yes, you can bid on it. There's some ABC certification that is required, but there are ways around it, and we'll talk about the certification later.
Yeah.
But yes, to answer your question, anybody can bid on it. Any vet can bid on it separately. Any NGO can bid on it, or any private limited company, anyone for profit can bid on it as well. Now the problem is, like I said, when they bid on it, the way these contracts are written are usually written on volume. So every contract that I've seen, it'll say you have to do a minimum of 250 dogs in a month, or 150 or 400, because there's pressure from citizens to get this taken care of and get this taken care of quickly. So what these contractors do is they've already undercut their prices. So the only way they can make a profitable business is if they do a minimum quantity. So they'll work on volume. They have to do a minimum quantity in a day to be able to pay their bills. So what they end up doing is they'll end up picking up dogs from everywhere. So to give you an idea, the only way you can have effective ABC is if you go area-wise rather than numbers, right? So you have to say, for instance, Chandigarh, we divided in sectors. So they have to come to one sector, get all the dogs. So the first day you might get 10. The second day, the dogs get a little sharper. You might get 7, then 5, then 4. There will be days they'll come back and they won't get any dog. Now, you have to keep on coming back to the sector, picking up the dogs and making that entire area 100% sterilized. Because what happens is, if I leave even 2 females or 1 female, just assume we leave 1 female, and there were some puppies who at that time were too young. So there were puppies who were like 3 months. So I'll say, okay, according to the guidelines, they're too young. I don't want to do these. I go to the next sector, pick up some dogs from there. I already know that this sector, I'm not able to pick up dogs because the dogs are getting smarter. So I'll keep on going to other sectors. I have 50 sectors in Chandigarh. I've got a lot to finish. I'll keep on doing that. By the time I finish sector 50 and I have to come back to the sector, by that time, that female has already delivered. Plus the puppies that were 3 months old are now 8 or 9 months old, and they've also delivered. Now I can't pick up their puppies because the puppies are too young. And I still, I'll pick up the mothers, but the problem keeps on multiplying. And there is no ABC program where they'll keep a calendar saying, oh, those puppies were 3 months, so let me wait another 3 months till they're exactly 6 months and try and go back and get them. So they're not treating ABC programs as a project. A project has a start date and an end date. It has a timeline. It has a budget. It has people who are responsible. It's like any industry that you work in. It is a project-based approach. If you do it scientifically as a project, you'll get results. If you're doing it haphazard, you can keep on. In Chandigarh, we've been doing it for 15 years. When we started with the initial population count, our survey said 7,500 dogs. The latest survey says about 25,000. Between you and me, there are well over 40,000 dogs in Chandigarh, maybe even 50,000. Right? So despite 15 years of work, our population has gone up 4 or 5 times. Now, there's a dichotomy, but what happens is we keep on doing it the same way. So just like, just like that saying goes, insanity is keeping on making the same inputs and expecting a different outcome. That's exactly what we've been doing. So yes, it still is necessary the way we're doing it, but creating puppy-free zones the way our NGO is doing it, and this is not about Peru's people, this is not about the NGO, this is not about us, but we've tried to show a way of doing it right. We've done it in the Golf Club Chandigarh, we've done it in Sector 5, 4, 3, and 2, we've done it in Sector 37. We've done 100% sterilization in these sectors, and after 2 years or 3 years, the number of dogs are still the same. The puppies have been done as well. So the puppies can't multiply, the dogs can't multiply, they don't let other dogs come in. So the population is still the same after 3 years. That's the way we need to do it. We just have to plan it strategically to do it that way. And there are some plans that I have. Unfortunately, nobody wants to listen to me when we...
I just wanted to say that, okay, we speak about what is, but what would be the solution? I mean, we're talking about ABC, we want something effective, right? So how can we convey this message? How can we make a change?
So the solution is, I've tried to put this message across a few times. This time we're doing it by example. We've done, so it's either the pull strategy or the push strategy, right? The push strategy is you keep on telling them how to do it, and it doesn't work. Government officials are very resistant to change. They've been doing it one way for so many years. They don't want to change. This time we've tried the pull strategy where we show them how to do it and expect them to come to us and say, okay, we want to do this in the rest of the city as well. That has had a better outcome in terms of other citizens coming to us, but MC has still not approached us to do it the right way. Fortunately, Chandigarh, we have a good ABC contractor. This is the first time they've done this. It's an NGO. They're doing excellent work. So hopefully with them, we'll be able to make a difference. But this is the only way that I know. There's another strategy that I have in my mind. This is the only way it works. And we can talk about it at the end if I have some time. But I don't want to take away from the rest of the discussion to talk about an ideal situation. But there's something in mind that I have, which I think is the best way of doing it. But you have to realize this. There are a lot of animal lovers who get their dogs sterilized. And then they try and impress upon the RW or the residents that, look what I've done, I've already got them sterilized. It means nothing to them. You offer anybody anything for free. You've already done the sterilization. It does not reduce conflict. Once they understand the importance of sterilization, you get them to pay for it or contribute towards it. Then you get them sterilized. Then they understand the value of puppy-free zones or the fact that all the dogs are sterilized. You should never offer anybody anything for free, because anything you get for free, including a Bhagavad Gita that you'll get at the traffic signal, you'll never read it because it has no value to you. If you end up buying it is when you read it.
Yeah, and I think most people don't really believe, not most people, but a lot of people who are not aware don't really believe in sterilization, or even, I mean, there's a lot of discussion going on now, but we didn't want to speak about the feeding. They say you feed the dogs, they become aggressive, they become territorial, and that's not a solution. So if you stop feeding the dogs, they will vanish and find somewhere else the food or whatever they need. Right? I mean, that's a typical scene which animal lovers face. So they don't really can connect with animal birth control, right? The awareness is not there. I mean, it's not really, people don't understand the scientific part of it, right? What does it mean to sterilize?
And the feeders have a very, very important role to play, but it's not just the feeding. There's, I have my personal views about feeding that I don't talk about because it doesn't matter. We will have a conversation about feeding, just feeding, feeders and their rights, and how to manage conflict through feeding. We can talk about that. That is a separate discussion in itself, especially with the Nagpur verdict that just came out. It's not a verdict. It's a statement. It's not even a made law. It's just a directive, and it's not going to go anywhere. But it's enough for some person to think that we can put it in the newspaper and then create a ruckus, because that's what newspapers do. But of course, it's not going to stand. But we can talk about that. That's a big discussion in itself. let's focus on ABC in this particular one, because there's a lot to cover, I guess.
Yeah, we wanted to speak about the guidelines. So if you want to go into detail on that, the AWBI
Sure.
guidelines, that was on the
So
list.
yes, so
Yeah,
we'll
so
talk
maybe you
about,
can, yeah, you continue, please.
so how can you get an ABC program started in your city, right? So it is, so the AWBI, what it's done is, directed by the AWBI, have stipulated that every district needs to have an SPCA. That's necessary, and every municipal corporation has to have an ABC program. Now, everywhere that we try and get it started, we hear several excuses from the municipal corporation. It's my job as an animal welfare officer to try and see where all we can get the ABC program started. Now, I run into several problems, several issues. One of them is they think that they need to avoid me because they're not going to do their job. Also, I don't have enough people coming with me to create pressure. So ultimately, it's the citizens' job to create pressure on the elected officials. And the elected officials being the mayor or the councillors, but the decision is made between the mayor and the municipal commissioner. If it's a municipal council, then it's an EO. If it's a village or a panchayat, then it's the sarpanch or the block development officer. So these are the people who need to sit down there. They have the purse strings and they have the infrastructure. They need to sit down and make a decision on starting an ABC program. They're the ones who need to be pressurized. It's difficult for me to go and pressurize every one of them, but it's much easier for the citizens who live there. All these animal haters who keep on writing letters in the police and, they have 50 signatures or 100 signatures. Every cruelty case that I do, I ask them to come with me to actually start a program. That is when they're actually being effective, because, you can get 100 signatures for removing a dog. The police still can't remove it. It's against the law. It doesn't matter. You can get 1,000 signatures, still doesn't matter. But you take 100 signatures or 50 signatures to the EO and ask him to start an ABC program, that's pressure. That's real pressure you put on your mayor and your elected officials, and they will help start ABC. So ABC, go to your EO, your municipal commissioner, your panchayat, your BDO, your block development officer, and ask them to start an ABC program. One of the biggest reluctance that they have is they don't have the infrastructure to start it. So they'll say, we don't have a post-operative care facility. That is the biggest problem. Once they commit to a post-operative care facility, then I can almost guarantee you that they'll start the program. I mean, this has been going on in Kharad for about 5-6 years now. We've been trying to get them to start to build an infrastructure. So what they'll tell us is, we'll do it at a dilapidated school somewhere. Like, no, a school is not meant to keep dogs in. It doesn't have a boundary wall high enough. It doesn't have kennels. You can't do post-operative care at a school. We want to do it at a park? Nope, can't do it at a park. Once they commit to building a facility, your job is about 50% done, because then they will issue out contracts. Sometimes what they do is they'll issue tenders without having the facility. So the company filling the tender is going to clearly come and say, hey, you don't have a facility. There's no way I can do ABC here. These companies are not interested in filling ABC tenders. So what you really need to focus on with all these people who hate animals is get them on your side. Tell them that let's go and do something beneficial. Go to the EOs, get your animal welfare officer along, get your NGOs along who will be cribbing about human-animal conflict. Take them along and push the EO or the municipal commissioner. If he's not doing his job, write to the AWBI saying that this is a district. We've gone here several times. So the secretary of the AWBI, Mr. Datta, is going to actually write a letter to the deputy commissioner and the municipal councillor asking them to start the program. There is some other help. There's not really financial help, but there's other structural help that the AWBI provides. Once that communication is started, it becomes easier. And then the municipal commissioners feel pressurized. And you can also go and tell them that, look here, you'll get the credit for doing a fantastic job. We'll do all the hard work. You get the credit. Government officials love that. So it's ultimately building that pressure that needs to be done by the animal welfare officer. Unfortunately, we don't have AWOs in every district. And since it's sometimes they're not effective, sometimes they are, sometimes they have the time, they have their own lives. So it's just pushing people and NGOs and these people to go and get it started. But like I said, once you get that, once you get the facility made, then they'll put out a tender. And from the tender, we'll come to the fact that all the parties that apply for a tender, according to AWBI guidelines, they have to have AWBI certification. And AWBI certification, any shelter, any NGO can get. They just have to follow guidelines. For ABC, there's a 93-page document. I can send you a link. You can make it available to everybody. It goes over in detail, and that's what we're going to talk next. But every little aspect of animal birth control and what needs to be followed, how it needs to be done, all the way from getting a survey done to picking up dogs to surgeries, post-operative care, what type of nets you can use, how you can catch, what type of anesthesia you use, what is the post-operative care, what is the catching procedure, what is the release procedure, pre-release checkups and all that, all the documentation that needs to go, including templates of charts and all that. Everything is there in this detailed 93-page document. That's what you need to follow. If your NGO follows it, you can get AWBI certified. Now, this is just a way for AWBI to see that you're actually doing a good job. They're not trying to be a hindrance in the ABC flow of things. Now, I understand that there are several NGOs and several contractors who do not have the certification, and certification takes time. It takes about 5-6 months. It can be done quicker. But if they're not certified, then there are some municipalities that actually give an exception. The exception is given only if there is enough, if there's a monitoring committee making sure that those 93-page guidelines are being followed. So if your MC is saying you're keeping on putting out tenders and the tenders are not being filled, there's not enough competitors because there's no, in a smaller city, there isn't a contractor who's AWBI certified, you can talk to the municipal commissioner and say, look here, if we have a monitoring committee that follows these guidelines and AWBI approves it, then maybe you don't need AWBI certification to start. But once the work has been started and we following the guidelines, AWBI is happy to certify them, right? So a good part of the process is they'll be certified for getting contracts in other cities as well. And you'll be actually helping it. Plus, you'll be following those guidelines. Those guidelines are extensive. They're very good. They're made completely thinking about the animals. Some of them are outdated because there are new techniques that are being used now. But for the most part, 90% of the document is still valid and still being used to, in a form that it is in. So I'll just go over some of the things that are in the guidelines. The guidelines of catching.
Let's talk about. Okay, from picking up the dog, let's say, okay, we called the officials, we say, we want to sterilize the dogs, the catchers will come, what's the procedure, they get caught, etc. pp. So just guide us through what is really happening, what should be done in a proper way.
So the first thing I'll have to tell you is, in any city is successful if and only if the feeders are helping. The animals have a huge role in a successful ABC program. I can tell you when we do surveys in every sector. So the first thing I have to do is I have to tell these sectors how much it's going to cost to get this done. In an ABC program, the first thing is survey. They need to understand how many dogs are there. So I can send 15 government officials all day, morning and evening, trying to get these dogs for months, and I'll get a very inaccurate number. Or I can have 5 feeders in one sector who know dogs by name. They've named all of them. They know who's male, who's female, who's aggressive, who's not, who's skittish, who's friendly, how many puppies they've had. They've named the pups. I get my surveys done in less than half a day. I'll collect all the feeders, get them in a meeting and say, hey, just tell me how many dogs you're feeding. How many dogs live in this area, this area. Within half a day, within 1 day, we have our survey. We'll add 10-15% on top because sometimes these dogs there's some dogs that nobody's feeding. But for the most part, your numbers are very accurate. That's number one. The second and the most important thing is the biggest difficulty any ABC program has is dog catching. They'll come in their van. These dogs get super aware of it. They have a way of communicating. They'll start barking. The other dogs know that the ABC van is coming. They'll take off. You'll never find these dogs. There is nobody in this world. You could have had 10 catchers, but once a dog is running on the open street, there is no way for them to keep on chasing them and trapping them. That dog is gone. You're not going to find it, even at 10 or 15 catchers. You have to triangulate and catch a dog. That's the only way it can be done. It's done with Balinese nets. That's what you can have a catch stick, but those are not very effective for dogs that are running. Those are only effective when a dog's being cornered. The most effective way of catching them is nets. There is no chemical. I get this question all the time. Can we feed them medicine which is going to make them lethargic? The answer is no. There is chlorpromazine that people keep on telling me about in different forms that they can be used. Chlorpromazine is a drug that makes them a little lethargic in a couple of hours. We don't know if it works. Sometimes you have to give them 5 to 10 mg pills. If that happens, it becomes effervescent. It leaves this green residue. And then even if it is meat, the dog is not going to touch it. Once he knows there's chemical in it, they're too smart. He's not going to eat that. And even if he does, you don't know the dosage of it. You don't know if you should give him 3 pills or 2 pills. You can end up killing the dog if you give him too much. I do not recommend chemical capture like that. There's acepromazine that can be used. It's a controlled substance. You won't get it in India. You should never get it. It's a drug. Even that is very dangerous for dogs. So there is no chemical that can be used for sure. The nets are the best way of getting it. Trapping them in a cage is sometimes possible. If you leave food in a cage, they start walking into a cage. It's a long process. Doesn't always work. But so that's the process. But it is infinitely easier if the municipal corporation is working with the feeders. The feeders are going to come pick up the dogs and just put them in the MC van.
Yes.
Even better, there are enough feeders who will put them in their own car and bring them to the ABC unit. That is the best way. So MC needs to understand that the dog feeders need to be on your side. When dog feeders know that the MC understands that, then you don't offer anything for free. Then you say, okay, I'll do this for you, but I want no animal to be dislocated. I want no animal to be hit. I don't want no animal to be picked up for any reason. And MC will listen to you because, hey, they want to do their job, right? Luckily, this time, like I said, they want to see numbers. Luckily, for now, like I said, we have Kawa here who works in Chandigarh, who are doing a fantastic job because it's an NGO which is based on caring for the animals, and now they've taken a contract to do that job. That is one of the best ways we can do it. They do involve animal lovers. Feeders are on their side. They have a good reputation, and they have to work on their reputation always. But that's the best way of doing it. So that's catching. But you can't, if you're catching on a catch pole, you cannot swing the dog using a catch pole. You can't hang a dog from the catch pole. That's illegal. You can't hurt an animal. You can't do anything that puts the animal at risk. Now, the animal, sometimes, people will complain and say the dogs were shrieking. Yes, they'll shriek. Even if they get into a net, they are not going to be happy. They're going to be tossing and turning. They're not going to like it. Yeah. That is not cruelty. Cruelty is if you're doing something that is actually harming the dog in the long run, not in the short run, not in the fact that he's distressed. He is distressed. Nobody wants to be caught. Somebody put a net on us. We won't be happy. So you've got to distinguish between cruelty and what is cruel and what is not cruel. What also is important is how they transport the dogs. There shouldn't be too many dogs in the van. There shouldn't be dogs who are fighting with each other in the van. If you should make frequent trips back. You can't have dogs sitting in the van for a couple of hours, especially in the summer. They will overheat and they'll die.
As per the guidelines,
there is numbers per van. If you look at the 93-page guideline, if it's a Maruti van, you can have so much. If it's a 4x4, you can have so much. If it's a Tata truck, so there's numbers per square feet that you can carry. Okay. The best way to carry it is, of course, if you have individual cages at the back, which are faced on opposite directions. That's the way most animal control vehicles overseas are. But in India, we don't spend that much. But it's good to spend that much up front and have have better animal control. That's what I would recommend. But
I mean, sometimes you
yeah,
see the trucks loaded and the dogs are on top of each other. I mean, this can't be good, right? In the hot summer, they
yeah,
cannot breathe.
yeah.
They're totally in stress. I mean, that's something which is, I can't believe it's as per guidelines, right?
So, yeah, so the guidelines are very specific about that. You'll go through the 93 pH guidelines are very specific of what you can and can't do, how you can transport them. Now, they're not always followed. So what do you do to actually, that's the section of how do we make sure that these guidelines are followed. That's a whole different thing. We'll talk about it next. But let's keep going about the guidelines.
Yes.
There are guidelines for we've already spoken about the survey. The best way, according to me, is now Mission Rabies does it in a different way. They'll geotag them. They'll upload it on their phone.
Yes.
They've done a decent enough job, but it is still inaccurate. The best way, I mean, you can do the same thing, but you do it with the feeders, you'll get the most accurate numbers. The surgery itself, the surgery has, there's two types of surgeries that are allowed. The midline surgery, where the females, this is for the females, where they go in through the center of their belly and they make a cut and they take the ovaries out. There's also a flank surgery where they'll go on from one side, they'll make a small hole, they'll kind of use tools to expand it. They snip the, they cordon off, I mean, they snip the ovaries, they remove them. There's a way to do it. In my mind, they're both okay. Of course, they're a part of the guidelines, so both of them are okay. The flank surgery is a little better, if you ask me, just because the healing time is much lesser. So what they'll do is they'll pull the organs out, they'll put an internal stitch, and on top there's about a 1-inch opening. So they'll just use some surgical glue and cover it. Now, most animals, all of us humans as well, when our wound starts getting better and the skin around the stitches starts drying, that's when the stitches start itching us. So we use ointments and creams to make sure that we don't scratch it. Now, of course, the dogs don't do that. They start pulling on the stitches, and that sometimes leads to ligations being, their organs popping out sometimes if they do it too prematurely. Now, when they use the surgical glue, there is no stitch on top. There's an internal stitch, but there's no stitch on top. So when it heals, it doesn't itch, so they don't lick it. So we've got about 1,500 surgeries done so far. The infection rate on a flank surgery is substantially low. We've had 1 infection in males and 2 infections in females out of the 1,500 surgeries we've done. The infection rate is extremely low. Also, when the dog is sitting, the hole is on the side of their belly. So the pressure is not on the wound. If the pressure is on the wound, then the wound takes longer to heal. If it's on the side, then of course, the wound takes lesser time to heal. Also, if they're sitting on the ground, and if the ground is either wet or dirty, the chances of infection going through that wound are much higher, because when they're sitting, they're almost always sitting on the wound. But if it's on the side, at least 50% of the times they're not sitting on the wound. So what we've seen is the recovery time in a flank surgery is usually 3 days. The recovery time in a midline surgery can be 5 to 7 days, sometimes even 10. And in some doctors, if it's not a dissolvable stitch, then the stitch needs to be actually removed. So the process is much simpler if you get a flank surgery. Now you need to have a vet who is experienced in flank surgery. There are not too many of them. But it's a much easier process. So if you ever find somewhere where you have a choice, please use the flank surgery. But those are, that's how we do it.
What I heard is that they use long-term antibiotic in the wound. Usually they use a syringe. That's what I heard. Is that true?
Yes. Yes. So there is a long-term antibiotic that they use, which lasts about 10 days. That can be given, but what I would still not release the dog right away, because the dog could sit on the wound and get an infection despite the antibiotic. So you definitely keep the dog. So what happens is, when they're releasing them, the doctor has to sign a pre-release form. He has to do all the checks. A vet tech has to actually do the check and then give it to the doctor. The doctor has to cross-check, and only then can they release. If there is an animal out there in the open that has an infection, with a tag, they can come back to who signed that form, and the doctor can be in trouble if the monitoring committee is good. So doctors will not release till they are 100% sure that a good doctor is not going to release it till they're 100% sure that the animal is healed.
So yeah, then talking about the risk of anesthesia, is it, you cannot operate every dog, right? I mean, the vet has to decide which dog can last the surgery. I mean, we cannot operate, some NGOs don't operate, for example, distemper survivors. They say, no, we cannot operate on them, yeah, etc. So is there a criteria where we have to say, okay, this dog should not be operated, it should be just left on the street, maybe at a certain age, old dogs, fragile dogs, very malnourished dogs, or do we say it doesn't matter, the number has to be there, we operate every dog?
Of course, we don't. So this is a very interesting question, very important one. Risk of surgery, anesthesia, which ones do we operate, and how do we determine which one to operate and which one to not operate? So when we talk about risk of surgery, there's risk involved in every surgery. If I go in for an appendectomy, there's a risk involved in it. So what are the reasons why we die? We don't die because the doctor accidentally cut a different organ and I bled to death. I mean, that does happen very, 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 very rarely. Risk of death comes from anesthesia. And the most common reason why animals die, and even humans die during surgery, is respiratory suppression. So what the anesthesia does is it slows down our respiratory system, all our systems, right? It slows down, it lowers the blood pressure, reduces the respiratory rate, all of that. And then we go off to sleep, our brain kind of goes off to sleep. That's how it's done. So what we have to make sure is there's no, and of course the mode of death is always heart failure and heart attacks, but the reason for death, are you doing all right, Kelly? You get some water?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
So the reason for death almost always is respiratory suppression. Now, respiratory suppression, the risks involved are different in different anesthesias. So the most common, cheapest anesthesia out there which is used is thiopentine. Thiopentine is not a very good anesthesia, just based on the fact that the chances of respiratory suppression are the highest. It really, really knocks out a person and a dog. It really knocks it out. There's very little movement. So sometimes humans and dogs kind of get up a little bit during surgery and then you give them some more anesthesia. So the best way to give anesthesia, let me take a step back, is you over tranquilize and under anesthetize. So when you give a dog a tranquilizer, he's already calm. Only then do you give them anesthesia. And you give them the lower end of the dose. So during surgery, when the dog kind of starts moving a little bit, you immediately, because it's intravenous, it acts instantly. So he's already getting IV fluids. In that, you just add a little bit of anesthesia, and you add a little bit so that he gets knocked out again. You don't overdose him, because overdose of anesthesia is what kills animals. So you underdose and you keep on topping up. That's how you do surgeries. Now, thiopentine is one of those anesthesias which will knock out a dog so the dog doesn't move at all. So any doctor who doesn't want to top up and who's doing a shoddy job and who cares about getting done with the surgery more than the welfare of the animal will use thiopentine. The other reason thiopentine is used is because it is the cheapest drug out there. So per surgery, the cost is really, really low. It's an outdated drug. It is not used in humans anymore. It should not be used in animals, but it is almost banned in several rescues all over the world. But in India, AWBI still allows it. Almost all the ABC programs that I know are actually using thio. The most common one that we should use, which is in the middle, is ketamine and xylazine. So xylazine is the actual tranquilizer. It is in combination with that we give them ketamine. Is also a controlled substance. You and me can't buy it. That is a shorter acting drug. So the dog does wake up if you don't overdose him. Then you keep on topping it off regularly. But cause of death, so the percentage risk is about half of what the percentage risk of death due to respiratory suppression and thiopentine is. ketamine is about half of that. So there are some tricks.
Inda, you are not audible. Breaking. Your voice is breaking. Doesn't hear me. No. We lost you. Come back. No. We have lost Inder. Maybe there's bad weather in Chandigarh. Comments. Yes, I think Arun. Oh, he left. So we're just waiting for Inder to come back. Do I have to invite him again? 1 second, please. Ah, here he is. Back.
I'm sorry. I think I lost you guys. So I don't know where I lost you, but I'll go over some of what I was saying again. So what I was saying
We were
is,
talking about the anesthesia and the risk, and yeah. So that's where we.
Yeah, so I was talking about I was talking about ketamine xylazine. Ketamine xylazine has about half the risk associated with thiopentine. It's a better drug. You keep on topping it off, but one of the safest way to see that the dog doesn't die of respiratory suppression is to make sure that the airway is open. So there are some tricks that the vets use. The most common one is they'll pull the tongue out. So they'll pull the tongue out because the tongue should not, sometimes the tongue collapses on itself into the throat. And that is a common way for both humans and animals to die. So you'll see in the movies as well, when they're doing surgery, they'll put some kind of a tongue retractor in your mouth so that you don't accidentally swallow your tongue. So in the dogs, what they do is they'll pull it out. So you'll see some of these pictures where the dog is lying with the tongue hanging out, looking like he's in a bad shape. But that is actually good for him. And if the vet feels that he's having difficulty breathing, he'll pull out, yank the tongue out a little more, move it around, so that the airway, the passage is clear. So he gets more and more oxygen in his brain. What also helps is so to answer your question, which dogs do we not do surgery on? We will not do surgery on dogs who have pneumonia. Because what happens with pneumonia is their lungs are already filled with phlegm, and they're having breathing difficulty already. So the chances of them getting, and that's also the reason why distemper survivors sometimes, if they have any pneumonia, they are very reluctant to do any surgery on them. So the right way of doing surgeries is to get an X-ray to check the lungs to see that the lungs are clear. Of course, in ABC programs, they can't do that. They can't afford that. But that's a better way of doing things. So blood test is a way to see two things. One is what their hemoglobin levels are. If their hemoglobin levels are low or their platelets are low, then the dog is too weak and we should not do that surgery. Also, what they do is they check the WBC. So if there's infection in the blood, if the infection rates are high, then that points to pyometra in females. The most common reason why dogs die during surgery after respiratory suppression is pyometra. So pyometra is when a female's uterus has an infection in it. There are several reasons why they get pyometra, but they already have the infection. So when the surgery is being done, when they actually snip the uterus, the infection starts flowing into the body. And you will see that dogs that are pyometric will die 1 or 2 or 3 days after the surgery. So that happens a lot when you say, oh, the dog was doing well. What happened? The dog was pyometric. Now the pyometra uterus you see is substantially different looking. It's much more bloated, and any trained vet can actually see the infection. The moment they see that a dog is pyometric, they should immediately put the dog on IV antibiotics to make sure that the dog doesn't die of infection in a couple of days. Now, that is another thing that most ABC programs don't do. They'll say, okay, the dog has, so they're kind of, either they'll ignore the fact that the dog was biometric, or they will just hope that the dog doesn't die because they don't have 24-hour monitoring with IV antibiotics. So they need to write down why. So when we collect statistics, we have to, a good ABC program should know why that dog died, and what they can do to reduce mortality. Mortality is a really important part of any ABC program. Responsible ABC programs like the one that's running in Chandigarh right now, they are very serious about mortality. Every dog that dies, they do an analysis on why that dog died, and it means a huge deal to them. Whereas some others, if they're doing it as a profit-making business, then they don't really care about it because the residents don't. So that's what needs to be done when it.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes. So talking about some of the other checks that you can do to make sure that your dog is healthy, the easiest one is a capillary refill. If you can't do a blood test to check the platelets and the hemoglobin, what you do is you lift the lid of your dog and you see the gums. The first thing you should notice is the gum should be pink and wet, moist. That indicates the dog is not dehydrated. What you also do is you pick the back, the neck, the skin on the back of the neck of a dog and release it. Just like my skin, it should immediately go back. If it takes more than a second to go back, that means the dog is dehydrated. Do not do the surgery. Hydrate the dog, give him IV fluids for a day or two, then do the surgery. If the gums are white, that means the dog has low hemoglobin. What you can also do is you lift that lid and you press on that gum. So you see that it turned white for a second and immediately went back to pink. That is called capillary refill. That time should be less than 1 second. If it takes more than 1 second for the color to come back, that means your dog has a problem with its hemoglobin and platelets could be low. Get a blood test and then get the surgery done. It's always best to get the blood test done anyway, but if you can't afford that, you should always get, these are some of the simple checks that you can do, right? The WBC is going to tell you, if you get the blood test, if WBCs are high, you give them antibiotics, bring their white blood cells low, get the infection down, and then do surgery. So in that case, if the dog is biometric, then the WBCs are not going to come down right away. Then you'll have a fair understanding that she probably has biometria. That can be seen in an ultrasound as well, but again, cost a little more. Then they palpitate their spleen to see if the spleen is enlarged. That's a simple test that almost all vets do when you take your dog to them. That's one of the easiest checks that they do, is to make sure that they palpitate the spleen and see if the organs are not enlarged. If they are, you've got to wait. But those are, and of course, there should be no chest congestion. If the dog is congested, if he's either having breathing problems, do not get ABC done. You will be putting him in severe risk. So those are some of the tests that you do. We talk about post-operative care real quickly. The post-operative care is important. Again, the contractor that's doing it, they have to give it good food. They have to have an intake and release supervisor. So the intake supervisor checks the health. Release supervisor again checks the health. The pre-release checks we've already spoken about, but the doctors go. Well, the easy answer is you do not release a dog till it's 100% fine. So there's no time limit on it. Sometimes these dogs are better in 3 days, release them. No, by no means should you keep a healthy dog in the center just because somebody is saying it's only 3 days. If a dog is healthy, release it. It's only going to get more unhealthy at the center. And he's not going to be happy to be in a cage. I mean, these dogs roam around free all day. They don't like being in cages. They get depressed. They get more anxious and sometimes even more aggressive. So the quicker you release them, the better. But don't release them when they're not well, because bringing them back and clearing an infection takes much longer. You rather wait an extra day and make sure that the wound is 100% dry and then release it. Sometimes ABC programs will also release according to where the van is scheduled to go. That's, since the fuel prices have gone up, if they're going to sector 35, and again, I'm talking sectors, I'm in Chandigarh, they will pick up all the dogs and say, all right, this dog is healed, but tomorrow we're driving to 35, so let's wait an extra day. Or this one looks about 90% healed. Let me release him because I'm going there today. That's what some, that's the difference with being responsible and doing a good job versus doing a poor job. Okay.
Yeah, that's one little remark on the hygienic part, of course. I mean, I read in the guidelines that you cannot really, cram the dogs. They need space. You should not put females and males together, or puppies and males, something I read. But I mean, the experience is different. Unfortunately, I feel we have to point out that the hygienic part is not given. I can only speak about Bangalore. I don't know how it's in Chandigarh. But whatever I have seen is not hygienic. It is dirty. It is cramped. There's no good food. They sit in their poo. They sit in their pee. And I don't want to sound negative, but that's the reality. Yeah.
Okay. So there's two ways of looking at it. I agree with what you're saying. There's two different thought processes behind it. One, if it's overcrowding. Now, what usually happens is if the dogs from the same area that you've picked up, if they're friendly, they will heal much better. They'll be less stressed if they are together. If they're with their friends, there's less stress on the dog. Even though there's more poop on the ground, it is easier for them to heal together. So there are some who will leave friendly animals together. There are some ABC units which will keep the aggressive ones separate and the friendly ones together. Now, anytime you're leaving animals together, they're vectors to each other. They can cause an infection. That is true, but you kind of have to play that balancing act. If it was up to me, I would keep every dog isolated for 3 days, however unhappy he is, because controlling that infection is much more important to me than how that dog is feeling in 3 days. What I would rather do is I would rather have volunteers who, it's a way you can design a kennel. So kennels overseas are designed in such a way that there's an internal and an external kennel. Now, if I had to design shelters in India, that's how I'd design every shelter. But a dog should be allowed out. So the kennels are built in such a way overseas where half of the kennel is inside. There's a barrier, and then the rest of it is outside. So you lift the barrier, let the dog go outside. It's still caged. He's still the only one there. He'll run around, he'll see birds and trees and this, that, and the other thing. He'll bark, he'll do his stuff. There's about 6 to 10 feet of place outside and about 4 feet inside. At the end of the day, you put food inside, he comes in, you drop the shutter. So he's sleeping inside, but during the day he's outside. Dogs are happier that way. It's just the way you design. You might have fewer dogs in your shelter, but you'll have happier dogs, and these dogs will heal faster. So
especially the street dogs who are, you see this guy 24 hours in a day, and they feel depressed.
Yeah.
Right?
And if they're next to each other, even if they're in their own wired cage, but if they can see the next guy who's their friend, they're okay with it. So shelter design is a separate topic in itself. If you and me want to do a session on shelter design, we can do it. Most shelters in India are designed extremely poorly. There are some very basic things about shelter design that we've got to understand. Now, what happens is when we're building a shelter, we just call an architect who has no understanding of animals, and he'll just make, whatever the maximum use of space is. So we do a poor job. We can do much better. The government can do much better, but that's a different this thing in itself. Just want to touch on one more thing, that when you're doing post-operative care, the most important thing is the vector. You've got to look at vectors for disease, and we'll talk about spread of infection in an ABC unit. But the most common vector is humans. So it's that vet tech who's going from one kennel, treating this dog, and then going to the other one, giving him medicine. So whatever virus this one has, we are the vector that's transporting it to the other one. So you have to do vector control. So the most common vector control that we overlook is feeding bowls. You give the same feeding bowls. If you don't have the same bowl assigned to every dog and you mix and match bowls, you're actually spreading infection. So the easiest way of doing it is that you can clean your bowls in potassium permanganate. That's the least you can do after every feeding. But the best thing to do is for the 3 or 4 days that the dog is there, do not take his bowl away. Give him the same bowl. Let him eat morning and evening in the same bowl, even if the bowl's a little dirty. You should clean the bowl up, but just in case it's dirty, let it be. After he's left, take it out, clean it with potassium permanganate, give it to the next dog. Or bleach it if you can, that's even better. Give it to the next dog. So that way, the bowl itself is not a vector. Vet techs will be a vector. It's very difficult to have different vet techs assigned to one dog each. So they will go from one to the other, but they should use gloves. They should rip the glove off, wear new gloves, go to the next dog. That's the way they should be doing it. All that is a part of the guidelines.
Okay, interesting. Very interesting. So who is actually monitoring it? I mean, who will check on it? If this is really being followed.
Like the Dan Brown book says, who's watching the Watchmen? So we have to have, so at the moment, any ABC program, the monitoring itself is done by municipal corporation. Now, unfortunately, I wish I had a municipal commissioner who was listening to this, especially the one in Mohali, because what's happened is very recently we had a state fair where a swing fell down. It dropped about 30, 40 feet. And they were trying to pin the blame on somebody. But the fact of the matter is, MC officials were supposed to go there and check that that thing is safe. Now, the MC official who's going to go there and check is not an engineer. He has no idea what he's looking at. So what is he checking anyway? Even if and of course he didn't go there and check at all, but even if he went there to do his job, what was he doing? The same is true for ABC. The monitoring has to be done by people who understand both animal welfare, disease control, who follow these guidelines, the 93-page guidelines like a Bible, who should know back and front of that entire guideline. They should be the ones monitoring. Now, what usually happens is you have a municipal inspector who goes there. His primary job, if not his only job, is to count organs. So the way they get paid at ABC is they'll take the organs out. Of course, they notch the ear. That's how they know that the females have been done. The males as well. Males are easy to see. The testicles are missing. But so they don't pick up the same female again. They'll notch the ear. That's a part of the guidelines. Now, what they used to do back in the 90s in India, if there's a way to fib and make money, that people will find a way. So they used to pick up dogs, just notch the ears and release them. And then you had these females giving birth. Then what the AWBI did in the mid-90s is they said, okay, when you do surgeries, you're supposed to preserve the organs. So the ovaries need to be preserved, the testicles need to be preserved. You need to put them in formaldehyde. At the end of every week, which is actually the end of every month, if you ask me, that's what happens. The MC inspector is going to come by and check, count the number of organs, and that's how you're going to get paid, by the number of organs you've done, not how many notches you've put on the ear. So lots of people will tell me now that they pick up a dog, they'll notch the ear and leave it. It is not beneficial for them to do it because they're not going to make any money. They'll only make money from the organs. So ABC programs have stopped doing that at least. Now the thing is, the MC inspector, he'll just go there and count. They're supposed to destroy the organs so that they don't use them again. Sometimes that happens as well. That's why I say I wish the MC commissioner was here listening to me. But what they end up doing is that's the extent of their job. They don't monitor important statistics that need to be monitored. Mortality rate is, of course, one of them. They don't monitor cleanliness, vectors, because the person who's monitoring is bad. So the monitoring committee that needs to be made has to have animal lovers on it. The only thing is it's a full-time job. You can't just go monitor on a weekend. You have to do surprise visits all the time. You have to spend hours, 2 hours, 3 hours every day. Now you and me would, if you're not doing another job, if you're sitting at home or you're running an NGO, there's a possibility you'll do it. But anybody who has a full-time job is not going to be able to do it. Volunteers, they'll go for a day or 2 days or 10 days. They don't do it on a regular basis. So if you ask me, included in the contract should be at least 2 people who have their full-time job of just monitoring the ABC facility. It should be a paid full-time job for them to just do this. And what MC needs to understand is if they do their job properly, and if they're animal lovers who do their job properly, it is actually going to help make the ABC program much more beneficial and cost effective. In fact, most of the cost that you're going to pay these salaries, it is going to be made up in the cost savings that they'll give you just by being more efficient. One of the most common things that they should track is length of stay. That's what I say to almost every shelter in India. Is your shelter effective or is it not effective? Depends upon what your average length of stay is. And I understand some dogs are more injured, some are less, some stay for months, some are handicapped. But average length of stay per animal is month on month, it should go down. If it's going down, that means you're controlling your germs better. Your doctors are performing better. You're picking up, you're releasing dogs quicker. Your month on month improvement you need to see. Even if it's marginal, you need to see that improvement. It should not go up. It should be coming down. If it's going up during a particular month or a particular season, then you know that, oh, this was parvo season in the winter, so it went up. So next year, the same trend should follow. But year on year, month on month, it should go down. That's how you know you're being effective. The same is true for ABC. Their length of stay, so the government has to pay that money anyway. But if the length of stay is lesser, that means your vector control is better, your vet techs are doing a better job, your surgeons are doing a better job, with the surgeries are cleaner, then MC is actually saving money. Or they're able to do more dogs in the same amount of time. So the amount that they're paying these two people is easily recoverable. But MC has to have that understanding and that foresight to actually do it the right way. And we need to show it to them because they will never get it by themselves. They're not animal lovers. This is not a blame to them, even if the MC commissioner was here. They don't have the foresight because they don't know any different. It's our job to tell them. It's the AWBI's job to tell them.
Good example, right? I mean, animal lovers, feeders, we all have to come forward and say, okay, we have to be a good example. We have to show it's working.
It's time to get involved. It's
right, not only
the
NGOs. Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about geotagging a little bit. Now, when the AWBI guidelines were written, geotagging wasn't a thing. It's become a thing in the recent past. It's always good to geotag animals on the phone. Also geotag the ABC tracking vehicle, so that they pick up and release at the same spot. So the moment they pick up, they geotag the animal, so it gets released at the same spot. That is important. That way dislocation doesn't happen. And there's a lot of people who will have questions about dislocating, that MC is coming up, picking up dogs, and they leave them somewhere else. What you need to do is, MC is not allowed to do that. So when when a vehicle comes in, rather than argue with anybody and not let them pick up the dog, what you should do is you should ask the MC, the person. First of all, MC vehicles will usually say on the side, municipal corporation. You still talk to the driver and ask him for his ID. You take a picture of the license plate and you say, this is the day this was here. This was the driver. He picked up this dog. If you don't trust the driver, just drive behind him. Make sure that he takes the dog to the ABC center. At the ABC center, they're supposed to do an entry in the register, and you as a citizen have the right to see that register. They have to show you that register. If they're not showing you the register, complain against the contractor to MC. It is your right. You can do an RTI and actually get that register. Any government documentation, you have the right to see. So don't tell me that you can't see it. You just have to approach the right person. So what you do is, if the person there is not showing you the register, ask for whoever is running the ABC unit, whoever the supervisor is, ask him. If he's not showing it to you, just say, here's my application in writing. Tell me, write it on it that you're not going to show it to me. Don't just tell me verbally. Write it on it. What do you want to do with my application? I want to see with my dog, he came from here, today is this date. I want to see your register about the entry. If he doesn't show it to you and he signs saying, okay, I'm not going to show it to you, take that letter and show it to the MC. It is your right to know. MC will show it to you. That's also how you let these people know that we are watching what you're doing. Don't stop them and argue with them. You actually have no right to stop MC from picking up unsterilized dogs. You don't have the right of doing that. MC is the owner of all stray dogs in India. You have to understand this. You are not the owner. If you're feeding them, taking care of them, loving them, does not matter. Unless you've adopted them, municipal corporation is the owner. They have the right of picking up these dogs and sterilizing them. So don't stop them. Just make sure, monitor them and make sure they're doing their job well. Right? So follow them, make sure that the dog comes back, and that's how they know that they're under the radar.
Good. Yeah. So I think we've covered most of it. Just checking if anyone has questions. There were questions about the
I have a couple other things that
operative care. Yeah, but we've answered that. I haven't seen.
Yes, and if there is particular questions, I'll answer that. I have a couple more things to add. The importance of data, we've already spoken about, length of stay, percentage coverage. What we should also do is any area, so there's a percentage coverage. So the reason why we're doing puppy-free zones is because we want 100% sterilization in one zone. We as an NGO can do it because that's our plan. We're not bound by time. We're not bound by anything. We make sure that we get 100% of an area sterilized. If you can't get 100%, you should have statistics. If you know the survey, if you've done an accurate survey that there were 100 dogs and only 60% have been, 60 of them have been done. So your coverage percentage is 60%, right? So you should have an active statistics of how much, what your coverage percentage at the moment is. Also, you should get dog bite statistics. Dog bite statistics, what we're doing in Sector 37 is when we started the puppy-free zone program, we went to, in Chandigarh, what happens is if a person is bitten by a dog, you can only track government record. You can't track anybody going to a private doctor. They go to Sector 19 and Sector 38 are two clinics where they get free injections. So when they get injections, they have a register. On that register, they'll enter who came from which sector, what was his name, what was his age and all that. So we checked what was the statistics throughout 2021, how many dog bites per month. The number that we got was average of 12.3. Then we started this program in January. We just finished it. So we've tried to see what is the percentage change. What is the average in the last 6 months? In the last 6 months, the average has gone down to 11.3. So we're trying to make a correlation between number of dogs done and dog bites. Now we'll continue to monitor it over the next 1 or 2 years, which will give us a clear understanding of a statistical understanding that the dog bites are actually coming down. Okay. That is very important statistic that we need to give to MC and say, look here, if your major concern of your citizens is dog bites, sterilization is fixing it by, at the moment, 1 out of 12.3 is about 8.5%. 8% in less than 2 months. This could be an aberration in the statistic, but if you can get it down to 20, 25%, 30, 40, 50%, all of a sudden MC is interested. All of a sudden citizens are interested. You're giving them a valid, actual solution that works. That is the kind of data that we need to collect and present. The only company that I've seen that besides us do it is Mission Rabies. They are actually trying to get similar data to see how effective they're being in whatever program that they're running in Goa. That's how other states get interested. That's how Odisha is interested and Karnataka is interested, because they want similar results for their states. So that is important. The last thing I had to talk about before I open it up for questions is preventing outbreaks. So you'll see a lot of these questions arising that we sent a dog to the ABC unit. He got distemper when he came back, right? Or he died within a few months, or something happened. So there's this infection thing that's going on. There's infection this is a classic term that all animal haters use, sometimes even dog lovers use, that there's infection in the shelter, but you can't pinpoint what infection you're talking about. So let's go by the diseases that dogs normally get. There's distemper, yes. There's parvo, there's rabies, there's leptospirosis. We already spoke about pyometra, but pyometra is not an infection one dog gets from the other. So even if a female is pyometric, she's not going to transmit it to somebody else. So let's talk about parvo for beginners. Parvo is a puppy-only disease.
Yes.
Adults don't get parvo. They sometimes show symptoms of parvo, which is gastroenteritis, because they have worms or some other form of gastroenteritis, but it is not parvo. Sometimes it smells like parvo because they haven't pooped in a long time. So when they poop, it smells like parvo. It's not parvo. Parvo is a puppy-only disease. Puppies build an immunity towards parvo by the time they're about 4 months old. So if you have a puppy that's already 4 months, you probably don't need to vaccinate it for parvo. But they're very vulnerable from 2 months to 4 months. So that is when you need to 100% vaccinate. If you vaccinate them, then their immunity goes up. But because it's a 6-in-1 shot that covers parvo and distemper and hepatitis and leptospirosis, you are protecting them for the rest of their life. That is the importance of vaccination. The number one thing all of us can take from this is, if you want to save your dogs, make sure they don't get distemper later in life. Please, for the love of God, get them, or anything you hold,
Even for pet owners, yeah, a shout out. It is very
any
important.
animal, absolutely.
Yeah.
Vaccinations save these pups. 50% of the pups do not die because of they're hit by a car and all that, but 50% of puppies die because of parvo and distemper. You will save a lot of pups if you get them vaccinated, a lot. And it's easy to prevent. It's a very bad disease to die of. They will die of parvo when they're younger, but let's talk about distemper. Distemper is a disease that they can get as adults. Again, if they've already got shots as puppies, it doesn't matter how many times they get caught by SPCA, bad shelters, government shelters, or they go to the ABC unit, they will not get distemper. Best way of protecting your dog, your puppy, is 3 shots you give them as pups. Please get them done. There are enough NGOs who are offering them for free. We do it.
So
If you're in Chandigarh, we'd be more than happy.
would you suggest that before the surgery, ABC, we actually should get them vaccinated, right?
So if
Because
you,
sometimes they come
adults,
back
what you
with
do is,
temper, which is a fact, because they were not vaccinated.
yeah. So adults have some immunity that they develop towards distemper, but not a whole lot, just statistically. So what we have to do is, you have to give a dog a distemper shot at the least 20 days, 21 days before they go for surgery. Now, we always can't do that, but if it's your dog, you can still give him a shot. If you're getting it done from an ABC, if you're getting it done privately, it doesn't matter. If you're getting it done from an ABC unit, even if your dogs are adults, as a precaution, get them at least 1 shot of the 6-in-1. That will protect them against distemper for sure. Okay, but say they aren't vaccinated, they're already at the shelter, and there is a distemper outbreak. Now, distemper is an airborne disease. It is easy to catch. But the distemper virus doesn't stay on surfaces for too long. So a distemper virus will die by itself within 2 to 3 hours, as long as there's not a very dark and damp space. So most ABC units, if they have good ventilation fans and the air is circulating and they have dehumidifiers, the chances of getting a distemper outbreak are substantially lower. Also, if there is, your surfaces still need to be cleaned. You can get distemper from a surface. It's not just airborne, it's air plus surface. Surfaces need to be bleached. Bleach is the only agent, and it's not industrial strength bleach. It is 1:64 ratio. It's the Clorox that you get in a store that is already concentrated to 1/64. That is the only agent in the world besides triglycerides that actually kill not triglycerides, I'm sorry, I'm saying this wrong. But there's another disinfectant which is really expensive. Those two are the only ones. Bleach is a cheap agent that kills the parvo and the distemper virus. So as long as you're not bleaching your shelter, if you're using phenyl does nothing. Phenyl is actually food for this virus. So phenyl doesn't do anything. Bleach is the only agent that kills them. Also, you have to make sure that the ventilation is good. That's why all these units that are outdoors, we were just having a discussion in the evening. There's somebody who told me that the mortality rate for parvo and distemper is really low at the shelter, but it's good that they have a shelter which is outdoors. It's all cages, open cages. It's not an indoor. If you have small kennels and they're little cubby holes, your infection is going to spread. So having shelters out in the open with more and more circulation is better. Okay, what else? Your vectors are your mops. When you clean, one area should be cleaned with the same mop, and the mop should be left there so that you don't use the same mop in a different area. Humans, like we've already spoken about, they either have to wear the overalls when they go in and take the overalls off, so they're not. Gloves are important. Feeding bowls, we've already spoken about. Ventilation is the key. Rabies, you have to have an isolation unit. If there's a dog showing rabies signs, you immediately isolate. If there's a dog showing distemper signs, you have to have a distemper isolation unit as well. That's what you do. That is all I had. We'll open it up for questions if there are any.
One question was about the post-operative care, but that we've answered already. That was from Arun. I haven't seen any other questions. Not so many people online.
So
with us
either they're not listening, or I've explained it
they
to
are
you.
listening. They have listened, but then they have to first digest. The questions will come later.
Okay, maybe I've explained it too well. So give me some credit.
No, you explained it very well. So and very accurate.
All right.
So you explain it very well. So there's nothing much we can really, question you on.
What I will recommend is when you put these videos online, of course, they're for everybody to see. The more awareness we can create, the better. I can send you the document, the 93-page document. Please make it available for everybody. If there's anybody who's watching who wants to contact either me or Kelly, I'll be more than happy to send you the document. You can go on the AWBI website. Or you can say AWBI guide. You can say AWBI standard operating procedure for animal birth control, and a PDF document will show up. It's that 93-page document. If there's a program that's already running in your city and you want to be on the monitoring committee, read that, understand it, go and check it against that document and see how they're doing, how good or bad they're doing, and the improvements you can suggest to them.
And of course, we want to add, we will continue with our lives. And if you have any suggestions, what would you like to talk about, please give us a shout. We're happy to discuss. And of course, thank you so much, Inder. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Very knowledge and interesting, and really happy to have this talk.
Thank you, appreciate it. Thank you, Kelly.
Take care. Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye. Yeah.
Bye, everyone. Have a good night.